Hello and welcome to your Tuesday edition of the Athletic Hockey Show. It's Ian, Mendes and Julian McKenzie with you. And it's a good thing, my friend, that we have a Tuesday edition of the podcast because not an hour or two after we wrapped up and put a bow on the Monday podcast, we had ourselves a mega deal between Philly and Anaheim. You know what I loved? I saw somebody saying on Twitter that that's the definition of a cut and dry trade. Cutter Gautheir, Jamie Drysdale, cut and dry. Come on, that's pretty good.
That's a very subtle dad joke you just made.
Yeah. I love it.
That's good. That's good.
Well, I had no idea. And it sounds like some people are now saying that they heard whispers that Cutter Gautheir didn't want to stay in Philly, and that became evident and crystallized over the World Juniors. But I got to tell you, I was shocked. I didn't even know that this thing was on the radar before it went down on Monday.
I had no idea this was a thing. I had no idea there was interest. It really was a blindside with this type of move. I'm still just trying to put together the pieces in my own mind about why Cutter wouldn't want to play for the Philadelphia Flyers. It's not the first time a young player would not want to play for a franchise, and the Philadelphia Flyers have been the benefactors of that situation. See Lindros Eric. But I'm still trying to figure out why Cutter Gautheir didn't want to play for the Flyers. I'm still trying to figure out if it's people were throwing out all these different theories out yesterday. Was it John Tortorella? And then there was video of him on a podcast saying how he got to beat Torts and Torts was excited to beat him. And then we see Torts saying he didn't know him from he didn't know a hole in the wall. I've seen people throw out theories that, hey, he liked Kevin Hayes. Kevin Hayes liked him, and Kevin Hayes left the Flyers in the offseason. That didn't necessarily go over well in certain cases. Does that have anything to do with that? It's at this point where there's so many questions with Cutter Gauthier's motivations. And at first I thought too, well, why wouldn't Cutter Gauthier's camp reveal that he would want out, right? That's also an intriguing question, all of this too. We're so used to hearing agents talk for their clients and talk about how they're unhappy or leak to a reporter that they're unhappy, and that could have gone out. But this was as quiet as it could get for such a highly touted prospect to somehow be available on the market. And then it's only after the fact we learned that he was. But the more I think about it, maybe because he hasn't played any NHL games, there's some kind of negative backlash that probably comes to him compared to an established player in the NHL doing this. You can tell that I'm very scatterbrained with all of this, but there's so many questions for me about Cutter Gauthier's motivations. And ultimately, did he get what he really wanted? That's what I'm also curious about that too. Going to Anaheim, is that what he really wanted? Did he really not want to play for Philly that bad that he was willing to go there?
But if you're the Ducks, you have to make that trade with some assurances that he's going to sign, right? That he's not going to basically let his time expire and pull an Adam Fox. Let's be honest, right? Let's call it the Adam Fox, where he gets to then handpick his destination. So you mentioned, you're like, man, I don't know why this guy wouldn't want to play for the Flyers. Who was Cutter Gauthier's favorite team growing up as a kid?
The Pittsburgh Penguins.
Do you think in any way, shape, or form, this guy just had a hatred for anything related to Philly to the point, and we talked about, what's funny is we talked about this with Laz on the Monday pod. It's like, everyone grows up cheering for teams and having a favorite team. But then once you kind of get into the industry, a lot of that evaporates. Is there any way that Cutter Gauthier's passion for the Pittsburgh Penguins extended into his playing career?
That'd be hilarious.
Think so. I'm inclined to say no, but it is kind of funny that the Flyers would have been probably the team he hated the most as a kid.
Absolutely. But that's happened before, where guys end up getting drafted by teams that, Connor Bedard grew up a Vancouver Canucks fan at the height of that Vancouver-Chicago rivalry, and he plays for Chicago now. I'll also do you one better, Ian. Could you imagine if Cutter Gautheir, Pittsburgh Penguins fan, drafted by the Philadelphia Flyers, he's with his family, and his family decides well, you know what? We're all Pittsburgh Penguins fans too. We're not going to root for you when you play for the Philadelphia Flyers. And could you imagine that wears on him? Just, it's a callback to what we were talking about. If you'd root for your kid, if they got drafted by a rival team, remember that?
Totally. And now we'll never know the answer with Cutter Gautheir.
Answer. Nope.
Because of that. So I got a question for you here. Okay, because Cutter Gautheir got drafted by the Flyers, and we'll talk to Mike Russo about this too. So Cutter Gautheir gets drafted by the Flyers and then clearly indicates at some point after he's taken in 2022, at some point in the calendar year 2023, he and his camp indicate to the Flyers, we're not signing there. I want to have a conversation about the draft because you brought up Eric Lindros. That's another good example. I brought up Adam Fox, another example. Now it's Cutter Gautheir. I'm going to throw out something for you and the listeners. I don't want to I'm just spitballing here.
Sure.
What if we abolished the draft?
Oh, damn, you're going there.
Yeah. And when you turn 18, just as if you were in any other profession on the planet, you get to choose your destination. You get to pick where you want to go. Is there any way? I'm not saying I'm advocating for, I'm floating out the idea. Would there ever be a world in which you're like, you know what? I could see that. It would make sense. And then we would never have guys getting the Lindroses and the, Adam Fox, now Cutter Gautheir. We've seen it in other sports too, where guys get drafted. John Elway famously said, I'm not playing for the Colts, right? There's about with Steve Francis in the NBA. Like, guys have said when they get drafted, I'm not going there. Would you ever advocate for that or think about a scenario where that could actually work?
I'm trying to picture scenarios of how it would work in my mind. Are you familiar with the National Signing Day that they have in collegiate athletics? Like what? Yeah, like what if it was like that?
Yeah.
What if you had the prospect pool and players decided, okay, I'm going to talk to these 6 or 7 teams, and then you had one day where all these players in their respective hometowns, or if they went to an NCAA school or wherever they're at, they sit at a table, they have all these different NHL hats in front of them, and they're like, okay, I'm going to play for the San Jose Sharks in 2024. They put on the hat, they sign the 3-year entry-level contract, and they go from there. That would be kind of cool, but I don't know if how many people would go for that. I think we're a little too set in our ways with the draft, but of course it's being decentralized after this year. But I don't know. I don't know if, I mean, I feel like a lot of hockey fans would hate it.
Well, if you were a fan,
I don't know.
Okay, let's say you're a fan in Nashville, Columbus, Ottawa, a small pick any small market.
Yeah, Calgary.
What are the odds you're not getting? If you're Columbus, you're not getting. Likely, Fantilli is not going to go there, right? Chances are he's not going there. Brady Tkachuk's not going to go to Ottawa if he has his druthers. So that would be the downside, right? But then the other side is like if you were Connor Bedard, and you mentioned, a guy grew up in Vancouver, but Julian, if he could handpick his destination, do you think he would pick Vancouver? Think about it.
I don't know.
Pressure of playing at home in the market. And at the time, if you go back 6-7 months ago, Vancouver was a little bit of a train wreck, right? So I don't know that Bedard picks it. Like, I don't know. But the problem becomes maybe all the kids pick the good teams. But then again, if you're a Fantilli, but maybe you don't want to go to a place that's crowded with stars already because
that's exactly what I thought. Right? That's my thought exactly. Because if you're a really good prospect, say you're not even number 1 overall quality, you're like a top 5, top 10, and you think that signing with Vancouver right now is the right move.
Yeah.
I mean, when are you going to get that spot to play? If you're an NHL ready prospect and you want to play or you care about being the man, do you want to sign with the best possible team right now? Are you okay with signing with a mid-tier team, a team where you'll get more opportunity? Like, would you sign with a San Jose right now? I can understand you might not want to sign with a San Jose right now. I could understand if you'd want to sign in Anaheim, where they've got a lot of cool young players. You play in California. They might be closer to being a competitive team. I was talking about producer Danielle before. There was a time that maybe Arizona wouldn't be on that list. I don't know if that's the case now. I mean, I get the college rink is the issue right now. You have to hope that they resolve that issue, but they're a team that's knocking on the door of being a playoff team. Also, college rink or not, Arizona is very nice, especially in January, February. You know, you go to some Canadian market, you walk out of your practice facility, it's cold in January and February. In Arizona, you can golf. I think that has to play into that too. I also think that, I mean, I can understand why you downplay Ottawa, but I mean, with new ownership, depending on who's part of those sales pitches, like if it's just that the players, I think if you're going to have a system like that, you can't just have it where the kids just pick whatever franchise they want. I think teams should have the right to recruit the kids, essentially. Like, you might be a small market team, but if you blow a kid away and their family with a pitch, who's to say that an Ottawa Senators team or a Calgary Flames or Columbus even should be ruled all the way out? And never underestimate the fact that a player may want to play close to home.
Well, I'll tell you what.
I don't know if it's that straightforward. I think there could be some merits to it, but I mean, that would be such a massive structural change. And I bet a lot of people would trumpet up a lot of those concerns you brought up earlier.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'd love to delve into this a little bit more on the trade between Anaheim and Philly. We'll do that with our pal Mike Russo. He's standing by, so we'll take a brief break here, and when we come back, Mike Russo in conversation with us about the big Philly Anaheim trade.
Cold turkey may be great on sandwiches, but there's a better way to break your bad habits. We're not talking about some weird mind voodoo from your crazy neighbor or some other doohickey that will try to find a way to make that work. We're talking about our sponsor for today's episode, Fume, and they look at the problem in a different way. Not everything in a bad habit is wrong, so instead of a drastic, uncomfortable change, why not just remove the bad from your habit? Fume is an innovative, award-winning flavored air device that does just that. Instead of vapor, Fume uses flavored air. Instead of electronics, Fume is completely natural, and instead of harmful chemicals, Fume uses delicious flavors. You get it. Instead of bad, Fume is good. It's a habit you are free to enjoy and makes replacing your bad habit easy. Your Fume comes with an adjustable airflow dial and is designed with movable parts and magnets for fidgeting, giving your fingers a lot to do, which is helpful for de-stressing and anxiety while breaking your habit. Gotta try the new Solano Fume. It's made with a premium walnut barrel and an onyx-coated mouthpiece that has a slightly softer finish. Right now is the best time to get started with the good habit from Fume. All orders between January 1st to the 14th have buy one, get one cores, so you can stock up for that New Year's resolution. Plus, as a listener of the Athletic Hockey Show, you get an extra 10% off when you use our code. Head to TryFume, that's TRYFUM.com/hockey, and use the code hockey for an additional 10% off, plus buy one, get one cores until January 14th to help make starting the good habit that much easier. Try Fume, that is TRYFUM.com/hockey to save 10% off the journey pack today.
All right, let's bring in our pal Mike Russo here, joining us on the Tuesday edition of the Athletic Hockey Show. This is it's the 9th of January. This is the last time I'll say it. Happy New Year.
Yeah, I know. Happy New Year to you guys too. It does become annoying after a little while, but since we haven't seen each other in about 2 weeks, I think it's fair.
Yeah. Hey, listen,
That's a Curb Your Enthusiasm episode, by the way.
Yeah, it definitely is.
Yeah.
Listen, Mike, you're about as plugged in as anybody in this league. And so I really want to get your take on this. Like, the Flyers have obviously known for months that Cutter Gautheir didn't want to sign there. And other teams presumably would have known that as they started to explore trade options. How on earth, Mike, did Danny Briere and the Flyers keep this under wraps so long and keep that secret under wraps? Because obviously that would affect the trade value if everybody knew he wanted out.
That's the biggest revelation to me in this whole saga, is that actually other teams cannot leak stuff. Who knew? That's a novel concept in today's day and age. I think it says everything about the respect level that Keith Jones and Daniel Briere has. I'm sure that they didn't open the door to trading Cutter Gautheir to 31 other teams. I think they probably identified players that would fit the mold if they were going to try to trade a talent like Cutter Gautheir. And I think that he went to those teams, conveyed the importance of keeping this quiet, because if as he said yesterday, Cutter changed his mind again and suddenly wanted to be a Flyer, that they needed to not absolutely skew him to the fan base and make them realize that this was a player that never wanted to play there in the first place. So that to me is the shocking thing, is that other GMs and other presidents and people around those guys that suddenly that learn about stuff. Like if you're going to trade for Cutter Gautheir, you're going to talk to your scouts about what they think of Cutter Gautheir, that nobody opened their mouth. They picked a good team in Anaheim, because if I think any of the insiders will tell you, Anaheim and Pat Verbeek in particular is extremely unhelpful when it comes to sharing information and letting out laundry and things like that inside the organization. He's extremely respectful in that process and keeps things quiet. So they picked definitely a good partner if you were going to want to keep this quiet.
So why wouldn't Cutter Gautheir want to play for Philadelphia? And on that subject of teams not wanting to leak stuff, I want to know if you and I think similarly. Why wouldn't Cutter Gauthier's people leak that he wouldn't want to sign in Philadelphia?
Well, probably for the same reason that I'm sure that they're upset right now that this is being aired, because for the rest of his career, at least once a season, if he's in the Western Conference, he's going to have to go to Philadelphia and deal with fans that aren't the kindest to people that they do not like. We've seen that through the history of not just the Flyers, but all pro sports teams. So I think that they've probably wanted to keep this quiet. Why would they also, why would he not want to go there? I mean, I think all of us have our suspicions. Maybe it really does have to do with something as simple as John Tortorella or something like that. That's what seems to be the reports out there right now. I sometimes think things like that are foolish because, you're going to have a long career, and John Tortorella, for the most part, will probably not be there long term. I mean, that's just the way that the world works in coaching. It's a short-term issue that you might have to deal with. But for some bizarre reason, it just seems like they absolutely ghosted the Flyers. It's very clear. I think Kevin Kurz, our incredible colleague here at The Athletic, is going to have a really good story coming out here in the next hour or so of really what went down there. And I know that he's got a lot of stuff in that story that I think fans are going to be very interested in. And it's very clear to me that for some reason, the Flyers had been trying to meet with him and just have been unable to, not just in, World Junior tournaments and things like that, but going to his college and trying to meet with him. So I think that for some bizarre reason, he didn't want to go there. Players do have that right to make it known that they don't want to play a certain place. I know that it's fashionable right now to just bash on Cutter Gautheir, especially because we're only getting one side of the story. But just, the one thing I'll always tell people whenever a player looks horrendous is that there's no loyalty in professional sports. If the Philadelphia Flyers tomorrow want to wake up and say, I don't want that player, they're going to just get rid of them. And everybody's just going to have to deal with it. And so sometimes players have the right to do the same thing. And that's the one thing I always get a kick out of. We saw it with Jimmy Vesey too with the Nashville Predators. It's like there's this just, Mikey Riley with the Columbus Blue Jackets, Justin Schultz, also when he came out, Blake Wheeler. I mean, there's been many of these type of instances, and the player and the teams always act like they're the biggest victims in the world when 99% of the time they're just getting up and trading a player and not caring about what it does to their life. So I know that this kid hasn't played a game, but loyalty sometimes, teams want to act like they're, being victimized in these situations, but yet they do this all the time as well to the players. So until we hear why Cutter Gautheir, if we ever hear why Cutter Gautheir didn't want to play there, I think that we should all, again, understand that we're just getting one side of the story here.
I want to move the conversation along because I know we have a bunch of things that we want to hit on with you, but I'm gonna do it this way, and I hope you appreciate the phrasing of this question, Mike. I'm gonna give you a scenario: who gets booed louder, Cutter Gautheir in his first game back in Philadelphia, or Mike Russo if we let you drop the puck in Winnipeg?
I wouldn't have the guts to drop the puck in Winnipeg. I don't even want to go to Winnipeg. Ryan Hart. I think the better question is Ryan Hartman getting booed more. I'll still go with Gauthier actually.
Yeah.
My guess is Jets fans get bored with the whole Ryan Hartman thing because when the Wild go there on February 20th, I'm sure something else will happen that will cause all hell to break loose. Yeah, that was an interesting story the last week or so. Really, it happened New Year's Eve day, and then a couple days later, it came out that Cole Perfetti was wearing a microphone, and apparently Ryan Hartman told him on there that he high-sticked him in the teeth 2 minutes in the game as essentially payback for the Brendan Dillon, Kirill Kaprizov situation that has Kaprizov out of the Wild's lineup. Sort of old school hockey, going after somebody that had nothing to do with the play. Instead of going after Brendan Dillon, you go after one of the young kids of the other team or a star of the other team. I think that all of us had heard the claims by Cole Perfetti, absolutely just immediately believed it, especially because we hadn't heard from Ryan Hartman in the last couple in the couple days after the claims are made for a couple reasons. One, they had a game. Two, they canceled the practice, and then they had a game the next day. So I got them after that game. And the only thing that I tried to, achieve with that story is to tell Ryan Hartman's side of the story. This was not a slanted story by any stretch. This was Cole Perfetti said his thing. Now Ryan Hartman saying his thing. Maybe the audio will come out one day and we'll know the true truth of exactly what was said. I think all of us that know Ryan Hartman and cover Ryan Hartman probably would agree that most likely what Cole Perfetti said is accurate. I mean, Ryan Hartman plays on the edge, often goes over the edge. And I think anybody that's looking at the video probably sees at a minimum that it was intent to high stick him in the, whatever the motivation was, high stick him in the mouth. So that, that's the only thing that I would, say to Perfetti's side, and obviously Jets fans who, have every right to be upset that one of their young kids got intentionally high sticked into the teeth. Is that I was not trying to, this was if you read the story, this was not me supporting Ryan Hartman. This is me allowing him his side. We got Perfetti's side. Nobody asked Hartman's side. I finally got Hartman's side. To me, it's over. Believe what you want. And maybe the audio one day comes out like Bill O'Reilly and Chris Berman, years later, all of a sudden the hot mic comes out because some angry, employee at Fox News or ESPN left and took it with them and threw it on YouTube. Maybe one day we're going to see this audio and find out that Ryan Hartman's full of it. But that was it. This was not me calling Cole Perfetti a liar. This was not me accusing Cole Perfetti of anything. I totally get why Jets fans are upset that Cole Perfetti took a stick to the teeth. It's dangerous. If he wasn't wearing his mouth guard in, he probably would have no teeth today.
Very well said on that. On the Athletic website, we have the NHL Awards watch up that Dom usually does periodically. Mm-hmm. A lot of interesting rankings, especially for the Hart Trophy. You mean some of the names are to be expected? Nathan McKinnon, Connor McDavid, but I don't see Sidney Crosby up there. And Sidney Crosby, he's just playing really well. How much of a factor should he be in the Hart Trophy race?
Well, I mean, it really is amazing how well he is playing, especially in the context, guys, of how, the struggles that Alex Ovechkin has had this year. I mean, when you get up there in age, Father Time does not spare anybody. And Sidney Crosby is still playing like, an absolute stud, not just offensively, but I watched him the other night. I mean, this guy could be up there for the Selke as well. He is just such an amazing player. There are, for all the awards this year, there's just incredible competition. For the Calder, I mean, I think we all think that obviously Connor Bedard would win it. But if this was last year, there'd be about 7 guys that I think would have a better chance of winning it than Matty Beniers. There's a lot of great rookies right now, but you look at the Hart Trophy, and you got Kucherov and Matthews and McDavid, and McKinnon's having an unbelievable season and should be right there as well. It really is remarkable, but Sidney Crosby just continues to be an absolute, stud in this league. He is somebody that I think, he despises losing. And, the key will be, obviously, if they get into the playoffs. If they have trouble getting in the playoffs currently, I think they're, near the bottom of the very, very tough division, the Metro. But they're right a couple more points here or there. They can get, leapfrog, the Flyers, the Islanders, things like that. that will make the biggest difference. It's the same thing with McDavid. It's like if all of a sudden they have risen to the dead to making the playoffs, I think a lot of us are going to look and that again, Hart Trophy guy.
Mike, before we let you go, you mentioned that the Calder Trophy is a hotly contested one this year, and Bedard obviously being out maybe opens the door a little bit to some other candidates. Can you give our listeners, kind of this national audience, the Brock Faber pitch? Like, tell us why he's so good and why he should be at the top of this list.
Yeah, and again, let me clarify. Like, when I give my Brock Faber pitch, I'm not saying that he should win the Calder. I'm just saying that it's not cut and dry. But right now he is not just playing at a Calder level. Now I'm gonna. It's funny because you know how last impressions are always the first thing you think about. He's coming off a really tough game last night, one of his toughest in a while. And got pickpocketed for the first goal. Where, by the way, Tyler Seguin looked like he was 2014 Tyler Seguin last night against the Wild. But back to Faber, plays 31 minutes a game for a team that especially won 11 of their first 14 under John Hines. He was doing it without mostly Brodin and Spurgeon in the lineup. So you immediately think that this team that is playing guys like John Merrill and Alex Goligoski, Father Time has started to hurt, Zach Bogosian, a minor leaguer in Dakota Murmas who's been good, but he's still, what he is. Jake Middleton playing, he's a quality top 4 defenseman, but he's now suddenly Faber's pair. Faber is playing 31 minutes a game, just leading this team in every single analytical category. His numbers were almost Norris-like from a defensive standpoint. He's starting to run their number 1 power play, which again, coming off last night, it's not one to brag about. He's their first guy over the board in every situation on the PK and all that type of stuff. So for a kid to come right off the college rink and to play as well as he has, and now evolve his game offensively where he's just getting more and more opportunity, he is just a special, special defender. And again, if Connor Bedard was not in the league this year, I think that Brock Faber would be walking away with this trophy in a heartbeat. He's been that good. And especially if somehow the Wild survive and make the playoffs, knowing that for the majority of the season, at least so far, they have not had their top 2 defensemen. I think it says everything about the guy. And again, this is not a indictment on whether or not I think that Connor Bedard should win the trophy, but the Wild, this kid on a team that has been at times very leaky defensively, continues to be a tremendous plus player, and in every analytical metric is just not only just tops as rookies in the league in defensive categories, he's in top 5 in a lot of different categories from just an overall defenseman standpoint.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun watching the Calder race, the Hart race, all these races, as you mentioned. Seem like there's 3, 4, 5 candidates for each. Mike Russo, as always, thanks for dropping by the Tuesday edition of the Athletic Hockey Show, and we'll hit you up again next week.
Yep, see you guys. Having fun the rest of the show.
All right, thanks so much. There goes Mike Russo. Notice he used the term cut and dry there. He said Calder race is not cut and dry. I loved it. It's like a whole theme.
We're just going to run that joke into the ground.
I am. I already did when I mentioned it the first time. Let's bring in Thomas Drance, shall we? He's covering the wagon of all wagons, the Vancouver Canucks. 30 years, my friend, since Vancouver and the Rangers met for the Stanley Cup final in 1994. And dare I say, a little bit of a preview on Broadway last night, and Vancouver answered the bell. So I'll start with this, Thomas Drance. Was that the biggest statement win from Vancouver this season?
I don't even know if it's their biggest statement win on this road trip, to be totally honest with you. I thought they were better somehow on Saturday, but man, was that a loud performance from a Vancouver Canucks team that's soaking up a lot of oxygen and should be. That series of back-to-back goals from Petterson and Höglander, like true 360 windmill tomahawk dunks on Igor Shesterkin and the Rangers in quick succession to effectively end that game. I mean, it's hard to watch those goals and see how the Canucks are creating. Like for a lot of the season, to be totally honest with you, they've been scoring goals, but the offense has been fortunate, opportunistic, a lot of deflections, a lot of rebounds, a lot of unscreened wrist shots, a lot of stuff that you're sort of shaking your head at the end of the game, thinking like, man, it's amazing that they keep getting away with this. Those goals last night off the rush, just ventilating the Rangers defense. It looked different, just as it looked different on Saturday in New Jersey when they crushed like absolutely crushed the Devils territorially. Since they put together this lotto line again, and I'm sort of hesitant to call it that because Miller's now in the middle where Pettersson used to be, but Pettersson, Boeser, Miller together as a line. They did that in New Jersey and absolutely dominated play. They did it again against the Devils on Monday, and we're just creating at will. Like at will, they were creating off the rush against a pretty stout Rangers defensive team. Rangers were sloppy. Canucks were great. I mean, it was hard not to watch that game and think, hey, this might be a team with a contender level ceiling that certainly I didn't envision them having, even as recently as a month ago.
We got to stick on Elias Petterson for a second here because one, that goal he scored against the New York Rangers, the other, like,
sick,
out of this world, dude, crazy. Two, he's a pending RFA. He's going to be in need of a new contract. A comparable can be made with him and William Nylander, who just signed an extension of his own in Toronto. Is that a fair comparison? Do you think Elias Petterson is looking at William Nylander and saying, "I want that money"?
Well, I don't think so, because I think Pettersson's dynamic is tied up entirely into, when he's ready, right? This isn't really a dollars and cents question. The fact is that Pettersson has outscored Nylander over the balance of their careers. He's younger and he plays a premium position. Nylander at 8 times 11.5. Like, for me, that's an absolute floor for what Pettersson's next contract looks like. Should he decide to go max term, the dynamic really shaping this is, when is Pettersson going to be willing to sort of get down to brass tacks and discuss a deal more seriously? He said before the season he wanted to wait until the end of the year. Despite, occasional insider rumblings that there was optimism or that things might be evolving, doesn't seem like there's any evidence that it has. Pettersson remains patient, and ultimately the outcome here is going to be determined by his timeline. The fact is like, Nylander is a comparable. All these players who are really high end, star level producers, I think are comparables whose deals somewhat influence all the other deals around them. But, again, I don't see the case for Pettersson to get a penny less, right? Like, this is a floor type deal in terms of how it might impact Pettersson's, valuation on his third contract.
Yeah, that Canucks core all of a sudden looks pretty good, right? With Elias Pettersson and I want to talk a little bit about Quinn Hughes for a second, because again, last night, Monday night, Madison Square Garden, it's Adam Fox who's won a Norris Trophy. It's Quinn Hughes who's hoping to win a Norris Trophy. And I know I saw you tweet on Monday about Hughes and Fox, and I want to give you a platform to kind of maybe talk a little bit about why Quinn Hughes should be mentioned in that same stratosphere as the Adam Foxes of the world.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think Quinn Hughes is one of the most impactful players, period, in the NHL. Certainly one of the most impactful defensemen. I just don't see many players in any position that influence the environment of the game as much as Hughes does whenever he's on the ice. And those that do are the best of the best. This is a rare player. This is a guy who just absolutely dictates the flow and pace of where games are played whenever he steps on the ice sheet. And I thought he was on his game. Only 1 assist, no shots on goal. Like, the box score won't tell you the extent to which he was the maestro that sort of coordinated a pretty lopsided victory for the Canucks last night in Manhattan. And this is par for the course. Now, the comparison with Fox isn't super fair this year. Fox is coming off a major injury. He's having a down year. I mean, this is a Norris caliber guy in his own right. I just think, honestly, I've long felt that Quinn Hughes' level of gravity, the influence that he has on the game, like, far outpaces Fox. Fox has the accolades. He's had more team success, but, I don't think there's any question which player is rarer, which player is more impactful. I think it's Quinn Hughes with a bullet, and I think it has been for a while. It's not about this season. I think, like you say, the Canucks core suddenly looks really good. I mean, Pettersson, Hughes, in particular, have looked like superstars for a while. This team just had so many areas where they were leaking, that it was hard for that to matter in terms of them driving results. You go look at the Canucks last year, for example, and with Quinn Hughes on the ice, they were outscoring their opponents at a rate comparable to what Vegas did. Anytime Quinn Hughes was getting a breather on the bench, they were getting outscored at a rate comparable to what Anaheim did. I mean, that's the sort of influence that he's had over a multi-year period here. And, this season it's come together. The club has a little more depth. They're not giving as much easy stuff away, both structurally and in terms of what they look like with depth pieces on the ice. And, it's coming together. You're beginning to see, partly because of things outside his control, exactly how good this guy is. It's starting to matter in terms of the wins column.
Quick follow-up here. Where should we rank Quinn Hughes in our player tiers next season?
Well, among defensemen, I think it's Makar, and then I think it's Quinn.
Okay.
I don't know the argument against that. I mean, I think you have to get pretty into the weeds with things like, well, he's always had a bigger impact on shot attempt differential than expected goals. Or like, you really have to get to a pretty sort of nebbish, like wearing your Seiko quartz watch and your pocket calculator area of the conversation to get to the arguments against Quinn Hughes. He's a top 3 defenseman in the league. There's no doubt about it. But this is simple.
Okay. We know the
Sorry,
trade deadline.
Sorry, Dom.
No, I was trying to not get to a point where, anyway, we're less than 2 months away from the NHL trade deadline. I think it's pretty safe to assume that the Canucks should be buying at the deadline. But do we know anything about what their plans might be? And also Andrei Kuzmenko. That's a name that's been kind of peddled around as possible trade bait these last few months.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how the Canucks navigate the deadline on a variety of fronts. I think there's been an internal desire to upgrade the top 6 forward group, but does that change? Does that change now that Petterson, Miller, and Boeser are having success and a lot of it, at least in a small 2-game sample to this point, as sort of a loaded top line? Does that mean that the club might prefer to get a second line center as opposed to a top 6 winger or a potential top 6 winger? I think this club would like to be bigger up front. Rick Dollywall and I sort of were told over the weekend to watch for names like Jordan Greenway. Jake Gensel would be a bigger target if the Pittsburgh Penguins can't keep up in their own Eastern Conference wildcard race. So, those are both wingers. And we were sort of told this before this lotto line came back together and started riding the way they have, at least since the club arrived in the metro New York area, 72 hours ago. So does that change their priority list? I certainly think they'd love to add some size up front. I think they'd love to add some depth on the back end, maybe even an impact depth player and a right-handed shooter in particular on the back end. So excuse me. So, I do think this team has needs, but in a world where you're going to stick with, and Rick Tocchet's remained deeply non-committal about this, but in a world where they're going to stick with this Miller, Petterson, Boeser first line, that might sort of focus or alter this club's priority list and really shine a light on the need for a second line center. Now, good luck. Every team in the NHL that fancies themselves as a contender would love to add a second line center. I mean, that's sort of the prize of prizes at the NHL trade deadline. So we'll see where that one goes. But, I do think the club's position, they've got this Oliver Ekman-Larsson buyout cost that's going to climb up in the years ahead. You've got Petterson expiring and do a massive raise. You've got Filip Hronek expiring. He's got arbitration rights. He's getting a massive raise, period, based off of his production and minutes and impact on this team's results. You've got some players like JT Miller who are crucial to what this team's done this year, who are, 30 plus, getting older. So, is there a moment where this all sort of crests around, not a 1-year window, given the age of Vancouver's best players, but like a 1-year opportunity where things have come together and structurally you might be best positioned to take your best shot now. I could see that for sure. Not to mention, I'm sure the organization's desire to reward a marketplace that hasn't, had an opportunity to buy playoff tickets since 2015. So, don't ignore those business realities either from a Canucks perspective in shaping how they'll approach, the next 6 weeks leading up to March 12th. Kuzmenko in and out of the lineup of late. He's played well, actually, since being separated from Petterson, being put on the second line with Pius Suter and Ilya Mikheyev. But, he was scratched 5 of the last 20 games, and he's making 5.5, and it hasn't been easy for him, and he clearly doesn't have a ton of trust yet with head coach Rick Tocchet. My understanding, based on some reporting we did over the weekend, both sides are still in the let's try and make this work phase. on this situation. There's certainly been no trade request. There's still a desire to make it all work. But, as I talk about Canucks shopping priority lists ahead of the deadline, I mean, they are going to have to move salary out or end up with a guy on LTI if they're going to make a bigger swing happen. A guy who hasn't even been a lineup regular over the past quarter of the season making 5.5, that there are some salary matching considerations that I sort of wonder about, especially given that, he's a pretty unique offensive talent and might sort of help the Canucks juice any return, right? Like it might be a positive value part of any trade they could potentially make. So that's sort of a structural factor I'm monitoring. But in terms of the relationship side, everyone's still bought in. Everyone still wants this to work out as a first option.
Well, I'll tell you what, Thomas Drance, before we let you go, it's great to get the catch up on the Vancouver Canucks. Can't help but notice now you appear to be in a hotel room, right?
Yes.
Okay. Are you in Manhattan or where are you?
Yeah, I'm in Manhattan. I'm going I've got radio today, 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern time. And then I'm going to take the F to Jamaica and grab an Uber to Belmont. So hopefully I make it for warm-ups, but we'll see.
And my question is, where are you coming? Like, it sure looks like you're coming to us live from what appears to be possibly what part of your hotel room are you at here? Like,
I'm at like the desk part, but it's one of those, like small Soho hotel rooms.
Yeah,
like
I was gonna say, it looks like a boutique hotel.
It's a boutique hotel.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been nice.
Looks very nice. And that's an insider trip for people that ever, even if you're a fan, if you're going to do Rangers Islanders or even Rangers Devils back to back, try and just stay in Manhattan.
Oh yeah, and try and stay in Manhattan downtown, like downtown, where it's relatively easy to get out to Newark on the path or through Penn, and likewise out. I mean, it used to be even easier when you just had to go to Brooklyn, but yeah, no, I mean, you stay in Lower Manhattan, and this is the best for like beat writers covering Western Conference teams, right? I mean, the Canucks will spend 6-7 days in New York, all told, playing 3 games over that stretch with nary a flight, in sight for me. I mean, that's as good a trip as it gets in our business. So it's been awesome. And this little boutique hotel's done its job very well. It's been a nice time in New York, and the Canucks have been fun to cover this week for sure.
We're gonna have to trade some notes on Manhattan stays. I've never done the Manhattan excursion as a beat reporter, so you'll be hearing from me, Drance.
Yeah, no, happy to help. I'll send you to all the best red sauce places too. I hope you like pasta and pizza.
Oh yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Hopefully, I've left you some. My goodness.
Yeah. Awesome stuff. Well, enjoy the rest of your time in New York. Safe travels, and thanks for doing this.
Anytime, gentlemen. Cheers.
All right, there goes Thomas Drance covering, like I said, the wagon that is the Vancouver Canucks. All right, Julian, let's wrap up the show. Well, also want to remind, or I shouldn't say remind, alert our listeners. So if you hit us up through Spotify, you can actually answer our poll question. We asked this on the Monday edition, and we could have asked. Drance kind of gave us a great background there on Vancouver, but we said, year over year, January 23 to January 24, who's the biggest surprise team in the NHL for you? Winnipeg, Vancouver, or Philadelphia? If you hit us up through Spotify, you can actually answer that question as a listener. So we'd love to get your take on that, and we could maybe share those poll results here in an upcoming episode of the Athletic Hockey Show. We also love to hear from you, the Athletic Hockey Show at gmail.com. Fill up our mailbag if you have any questions about the trade that went down today, talking with Drance, talking with Russo, anything that we hit on, the idea of abolishing the draft. Hit us up, the Athletic Hockey Show at gmail.com. I do want to wrap up. We were talking about Dom's model for the awards. And there's a couple things that I'm with you on, like Sidney Crosby not being on there is okay. Like, I think
it's noticeable.
Totally noticeable. The other one that I know you wanted to hit on maybe a little bit, and then I want to talk about Jack Adams real quick. The Selke Award.
Yeah.
Best defensive. Now, again, this is Dom's model, so it really obviously skews heavy on the numbers, the underlying numbers, the analytics, all that stuff. I was shocked to see the number one name on that list, and I think you were too.
Yeah, here's the thing. As someone who was in Montreal and got to watch the beginning of this person's career, I'm not surprised that they're getting better and better from a defensive standpoint. I just didn't expect that the ratings would give them this much respect, at least in Dom's eyes. For the Selke, right now, if you go on that NHL Awards Watch post, Nick Suzuki has the best defensive rating according to Dom's model. So better than a Sam Reinhart, who's having himself a fantastic year. Jordan Stahl's on that list. Alexander Barkov is on that list. Anze Kopitar further down on that list, like 7th best in terms of a defensive rating. But Nick Suzuki, who, for those who love to follow Dom in his tweets, and there's this one post he had about contracts that won't age well. There was a time when a lot of people were coming at Dom because he thought Nick Suzuki's contract would not age well. I wonder how Canadiens fans will feel today waking up and seeing Nick Suzuki rank as high as he does on the Selke rating. There's another one I want to get to, and I'm a bit surprised about this too, but I'm also, I'll give Jacob Markstrom his props. So according to Dom's model, Jacob Markstrom's second best in terms of goals is, I'm trying to think if it's I want to make sure I get the acronym right here. The goal
GSAA,
save,
right?
The GSAA, the goal save above expected metric here. And Connor Hellebuyck being number 1, that makes sense. Thatcher Demko being 3rd, that makes sense. Cam Talbot on that list. But Jacob Markstrom, he's actually been, especially these last few games, he's been good. He's been solid. There was a time last year where he was not reliable, and the running joke with him was that he would allow the first goal at almost every point. But he has been the exact opposite of that. And if this team was a little bit better, maybe you could make a genuine case for him to be at least considered for the Vezina. I don't know how strong that case looks now, especially with so many other good goalies playing well this year, but it's fascinating to see Jacob Markstrom on that list.
Yeah, and in Dom's model, the top 3 goalies all play for Canadian teams. Connor Hellebuyck 1, Jacob Markstrom 2, Thatcher Demko 3. Now, one thing that Dom doesn't have, and this one's, Julian, this is always a tough one to vote or figure out how to vote on the Jack Adams Award, because there aren't underlying numbers. I mean, you could look at the team's underlying numbers, but there's nothing that can specifically, like a metric that says, this coach is worth X amount of wins. Like if John Cooper was coaching in Buffalo, do we know that they would be better? Like there's nothing tangible, right? A lot of it is based on feel and gut and whatnot when it comes to the Jack Adams. As we hit the halfway point of the season, I'm going to throw a couple names at you here, Julian. I'm going to throw a couple of names at you for potential Jack Adams Award winners. And, what I think is interesting is that we had the poll question on Monday about the big surprise teams, and it's no surprise that the coaches for all 3 of those teams that we mentioned happen to be on this list I'm going to throw at you. So if you were voting for the Jack Adams Award, best coach of the year at the halfway point of the season, there's Rick Tocchet in Vancouver. Thomas Drance just gave us a great kind of snapshot of where the Canucks are at. I think there needs to be John Tortorella, as Philadelphia is punching well above their weight and well beyond expectations. Rick Bowness, remember last year at the end of the year when Rick Bowness, and it was almost like, I'm too old for this bleep. Like it was almost like this guy's done, and all he's done is come back and he also had to leave the team briefly to go be with his wife who wasn't doing well. And the Jets kind of rallied around him, and he's been great. They've been great. The other name I'll throw in there too, they're not in a playoff spot right now, but they've been hanging around, and that's Spencer Carbury in Washington. The Capitals are kind of a bit of a surprise. So those are the names I'm thinking of. If I gave you a vote, Julian, and by the way, I believe on the Jack Adams Award, it's the broadcasters that do that one. Yeah,
that's right. Don't get you right on.
So that's like the play-by-play kind of those radio and television broadcasters, they vote on it. But I'm going to give you a vote at the halfway point. Who gets it for you?
I think you got to give it to Rick Tocchet. I mean, I think the fact that the Vancouver Canucks are doing as well as they're doing, and Rick Tocchet, he gets that time to implement his tactics, his strategy, his way of thinking, what he demands from this team, that can't go unnoticed. But also Rick Bowness too, right? Like That's a really unique story with the Winnipeg Jets and them being the best team in hockey. Like, wow. I have to say, those two teams have really surprised me right at
Yeah.
the top, considering what they went through last year. The Winnipeg Jets, I remember yesterday we were talking about this in terms of teams that surprised us, and I was mentioning the timing of say, if we were asking this question in January 2023, there was a point where the Winnipeg Jets were the best team in Canada, and they fell off a cliff. And the fact that Rick Bowness has been able to bring them back up to the top, that can't be overlooked. And Rick Tocchet too. I mean, he comes over halfway through last year, and he really gets them to a point that nobody expected for this team while having so many great players. And I also wonder if that plays into his candidacy for Jack Adams. So I would like to give a vote to one of those two guys, but I do like John Tortorella and Spencer Carbury being mentioned. I still think there was a point when John Cooper for Jack Adams made sense. I'm not sure if that still carries the same weight compared to some of those other players in this race. But I think right now, if I had a vote, I'd be deciding between Rick Tocchet and Rick Bowness right now.
Yeah, it's funny. You know what's interesting is that you can argue that the three top candidates that we mentioned, Bowness, Tocchet, and Tortorella, if there is a little connective tissue amongst them, it's that they're kind of old school, right? Like Tortorella for sure, Tocchet, I think for sure. And we just talked about Bowness last year kind of going off. Like, it's kind of interesting, right? We're at this point where we kind of think that the only way or the best way to communicate with young athletes is you need a true communicator, less of a disciplinarian. But I would argue that as we're doing this exercise, it's kind of funny. It's not lost on me. And I think you always have to strike a balance, but it's not lost on me that the three top candidates all seem to be the type that we would put in the disciplinarian bucket or a little bit more of the old school bucket, right?
I guess, but I have to assume that they have to. I don't think you can get by in this league by just being this hardcore disciplinarian and not kind of throw the carrot out to your players. There's a balance there, right? We hear all this time. Well, we give a lot of guff to John Tortorella about how he handles us in the media and how he comes across as a curmudgeon sometimes. But he loves being in that locker room. He loves being around his players, and he loves seeing them do well. And while he demands a lot out of his players, I get the sense from him that he genuinely loves them and he wants to see them do well. And I think he will give them a break if it comes time for that. But of course, you have to play well. Rick Tocchet, I think that Vancouver Canucks team, they needed some kind of structure, and I think he was good at implementing that. But Rick Tocchet may also have that balance too. And Rick Bowness as well. I mean, it's funny we're thinking about some of these teams that have those old school guys, but I think this probably applies to Winnipeg too. That's an older core, right? That just might work for them to have that type of style leading them with some of those older players leading them. It's not a new, fresh, young team, bunch of Gen Z, Gen Alpha guys on the team. We're talking about guys like Connor Hellebuck and Mark Scheifele in their 30s leading this team. It's I think it works with Rick Bowness.
Yeah, no, excellent point. All right, we'll leave the Tuesday edition of the Athletic Hockey Show there. So we're going to wrap up recording here. I want you to make a prediction. Monday, when we wrapped up recording, we had a massive trade. What are we going to get between now and the Wednesday episode of the podcast, which, by the way, will come your way early in the afternoon on, I think we're shooting for a 1 o'clock Eastern time, going live with Down Goes Brown and Shayna Goldman. Between now and then, what's the story? Is there something big coming?
Okay, so the big story, I think, I'm kind of going off of what sort of makes sense considering this past weekend's events, but I'll add an extra element to it. We're going to learn. I mean, I'm just guessing off this point. I could be totally wrong. I'm not in the market. I think the story for Wednesday will be Connor Bedard's injury diagnosis and how long he'll be out and how long we're going to have to, and if his all-star candidacy will be in doubt. And I have a weird feeling considering what jaw injuries are like. It probably already was. I feel it. This is just a guess. I think that's just going to be the story. And Wednesday, we're going to be talking about how there's such a missed opportunity with him not being there, which also tracks because I believe Thursday's the last possible day fans can vote in the 12 extra skaters for this year's All-Star game.
Okay. I think based on what Mike Russo said, The thing that we're going to be talking about late on Tuesday into Wednesday is Kevin Kruse's story with more details on Cutter Gauthier's departure.
Oh yeah,
Philly,
absolutely.
Right? Maybe, but we'll see. It's going to be a lot of fun between now and then because, like we learned on Monday, the news cycle, it never stops around here. So we want to thank everybody for listening to Julian and I on the Tuesday edition of the pod. As I mentioned on Wednesday, Sean McAdoo, Down Goes Brown, and Shada Goldman will drop by joining us here on the Athletic Hockey Show. Please leave us a 5-star rating and review. You can follow us on YouTube as well at youtube.com/@the-athletic-hockey show. Right now, you get a 1-year subscription to The Athletic for $2 a month when you visit theathletic.com/hockey show.